Good morning, everyone. This is Ron. Saturday morning, a little after 10 a.m. We'll go ahead and get started and see if we have any questions. Questions or comments. Lots going on out there. A lot of stuff going on out there. And that was one of the questions I had for Pastor to kind of sum things up and kind of tie things together. But a lot's going on, not only in America, but around the world. And so any observations and or questions about anything?
Sure, I can add something. And this is just a general observation, but as I'm sure we've all been aware of to some extent, we're sort of seeing the American empire in decline, essentially. And this is really the beginning of that process and the beginning of the transition to, as we've spoken about before, a nation as opposed to a I don't even know what you want to call it, a large corporate entity, maybe. But I think a lot of what we're seeing just around the world and in the United States is all under that sort of umbrella of phenomenon that occurs when an empire is in decline, and the people who are in power in that empire sort of refuse to be aware of it, either for various reasons. One of them being they're probably no longer even have the ability to sort of be self-aware in that way. Anyway, I just wanted to add that because I think that is going to contextualize a lot of what we have been seeing and will see. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. That really sort of goes into a couple of verses that I was looking at today. So if we get to it, if not, we'll get to it another time, but it's a good start for today. Anyone else, questions or comments? Thank you. I got a couple of things. I mentioned one thing I want to ask Pastor about, summing up what's going on in the world and how that relates to us and where we are. The other thing that really got my attention, there was a school district here in the upstate that had an emergency school board meeting, I guess a couple weeks ago now, but what it related to was kids coming to school and wanting to be related or known as animals, primarily cats, and I think dogs, and the silly part of it is that parents are bought into it, and parents are being supportive of this, that saying that kids can transform or be whatever they want to be. And as ridiculous as it sounds, I kind of looked it up. I Googled it and found out this is something going on across the nation. And there are school boards that are sort of conforming to this, meaning that kids don't have to be kids. I mean, like one example was kids meowing when asked a question and not participating in classes, and parents are saying that they're just being expressive of who they are because today they may be this and tomorrow they may come back to, but that's just a part of their creativity and expressions. And I think personally this has gone too far, but I kind of see a silver lining in it. But I'm just curious as to whether or not you guys have heard of this thing, or what do you think of it? And well, I'll just leave it out there. What do you think of this?
I really think it's ridiculous. However, it does not surprise me because whatever starts rather in this country, especially with white kids, always go to the extreme. And you see those parents who have nothing else to do during the day, jumping up and down on behalf of their kids, and forcing the systems, whether it be the school system or any other, to acquiesce to what they want. And this does not happen only with those kids who are embracing the alphabet kids, LGBTQ, and all the others. It's not just those; it's all of them. It's on both sides of the spectrum. It's on the right and on the left. It is both liberal and conservative. It's just crazy. Now, I do believe that at some point we're gonna have to find a happy median, because if we don't, then we are going to see a decline. Well, we are already seeing that, though. I read something the other day where we are experiencing a huge decline in intellectual abilities in American students, as well as being less able to read than ever before. That educational decline is happening not only because of what DeSantis is doing, but it's also happening because parents don't think their kids can do anything wrong, and they think that all forms of authority should submit to what their kids' desires are. As Nick said earlier, we are experiencing a decline in this country, and at some point, our nation will be established. But right now, this is not a nation. This is a country who has no regard for its people, and as a result of that, its people has lost its way. And when people lose their way, it begins to show up more readily in kids and policies. So that's what my take on it. But I do believe it's necessary in order for us to get to a place where we can rebuild from the ground up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I just
Yeah,
want to, if I can, some of that is blown out of proportion, like the scale to which that is those kinds of strange sounding incidences are occurring. But the general idea that there is a search for some sort of collective identity on an individual level in terms of how you relate to society and the world, and on a collective level in terms of how we want to move forward together with what is and what is not acceptable for various reasons, is very much the struggle that we are in currently. And those kinds of things that we hear about, like Pastor Richard said, we will find a happy medium, because what the search for identity is one that is very difficult, as we all know. And if there's no structure present, then you basically go in every single direction during that process. And that happens on a collective level, as well as potentially an individual level. But anyway, those kinds of things will be resolved to whatever extent they were occurring in the first place when we form that foundation for the psychological and spiritual basis for the nation of people we want to be. Thank you.
That's the part I was getting to when I said the silver lining, Nick. Just one other thing to throw in that argument is it is also believed that these clashes with I won't say clashes, this friction between parents and teachers has something to do with the teacher shortage as well. People are just getting sick and tired of stuff like this, these little things like this, and being told what they can teach and not teach, and what they can say, and teachers are walking on eggshells and not being able to be expressive. But you touched on the silver lining that I was talking about. I think this is a lash out at parenting, saying we don't want to be like you. We don't want to serve the same God you did, or or walk the same way you walk as far as your way of life and your lifestyle. And their only way of expression, because they don't know spirituality, is to lash out in the manner that they're doing. They see themselves as animals rather than as spiritual beings, because that has not been open to them. So I agree, the earth needs guidance. And that's what I choose to see it. I guess I hope I'm saying the same thing that you and Pastor said. But
Yeah,
I think it's right.
I believe so. If I can, I didn't mean to cut anybody off. The whole pattern is one of regression because of an lack of awareness of how to proceed beyond what has been created for us within this sort of material consciousness context. It's the same. There are many layers, of course, to how all these things play out, individually, socially, politically, etc. But the whole thing is the not knowing what to go to next, because of how we've been confused and how we've been mired in a particular pattern of thinking for so long. And that same thing is reflective in the political and social realm in the resurgence of fascism everywhere in the world, especially in the United States. Fascism is, among other things, an attempt to regress into the past, quote unquote, which is exactly where Make America Great Again comes from, is a past that did not exist except for in the minds of the people within the context of their own ignorance. But all of that tendency to retreat from whatever the future is out of fear, out of ignorance, etc., is because you don't know where to go, because where you are going is completely new. It is a new earth. It is a new psychological and spiritual foundation upon which society sits. And that has not been present, definitely not in the Western quote unquote world, anywhere in the last 1,000 years. And the people who are around, or best example, who are the best example of how to found a nation, Africans, Native Americans, etc., were wiped out to the point where the process of white people absorbing that knowledge from them basically became as slow as it possibly could, which is why it's taken so long for this to happen. But I do believe that is what we are seeing play out in a variety of ways, if that makes sense. Thank you.
It does indeed. Yes, sir. Thank you. Anyone else? Questions or comments?
I have a question.
Okay.
Do you think that the mankind creativity has been stifled? Because these people want to act out as animals?
Say it one more time, Evelyn, please.
I said, do you think that people's creativity has been stifled? Because they don't know what to do, instead of them just, like knowing who they are, they like reach out to something outside of them. And it's like when you're in church, you done burned out and you don't know what else to do. There's nothing else to do. So that's my question.
I'm sure you're going to answer.
Yeah, I'm going to speak to it, I guess. I think that creativity has been stifled for years. I think that was being stifled more so now than ever is human direction when it comes to, as Nick said earlier, identity. I don't believe that humans know who they are, and I don't believe that. I do believe rather that there are people who have known who they are, but even they have lost their direction because they have assimilated themselves into a structure. Uh, Please mute your phones. Assimilated themselves into a structure that has been established by America itself. When you really think about, there is no functionality in any country unless America agrees that it's okay for them to function. When you think about it in that way, then not only do you stifle creativity, you also render it powerless. And now, if you never had creativity, then you don't even miss it. And that in itself means that you don't know which direction to turn in order for you to move forward. What I see is that if we look at what happened, let's say 100 years ago, if we look at all of the inventions that came into existence in the last 100, 200 years, there has not been anything new that has been invented, has only been built upon. I use that invention. Why? Because that also speaks to where the mind is, where the thoughts are. There are no progressive thoughts in this world on a large scale. Progressive thoughts are spiritual thoughts, and in order for spirituality or spiritual thought to be more prevalent, then there's definitely going to be a demise in religious thoughts. And it sounds like I may be rambling, but what I'm saying is that the key to whether it's government, whether it is anything in the midst of the people, is based upon religion versus spirituality. And when you see a decline in religion, or see religion being shown for what it really is, absolutely nothing except bondage, then you begin to see the loss in the mindset of the people, whether they have been engaged in religion or not. The kids who are calling themselves animals, or the kids who don't know who they are now, they may have never been engaged in religion. However, they have been affected by religion. When we read things like evangelicals want to control religion, education, etc., they already control that. Those things are already under their control. The key to it goes back to fascism. It goes to creating an environment worldwide where Europeans have total control over the world at large, and that is a retrogressive desire that never existed in reality at all. It is no different than this myth about the Wild Wild West. There's no such thing as the Wild Wild West, and there never was a such thing as that. Today, there is no such thing as progressive religion. There is no such thing as progressive government. It is only a stagnation of all of those institutions in this society. And when you see people like Lee Elders making statements that he's running for president because he is tired of people talking about systematic racism in this country, he says it does not exist. When you begin to see things, hear things like that, when people begin to make those kind of statements, you say, well, he's just blind. No, he's not. The whole country is blind. No, I'm sorry, not blind. The whole country is in denial. He's not blind. He know he's lying. There is that. What back in the day, it was like, if you become a Republican, you can become wealthy. What are you talking about? If you become a Republican, then that means that the line is shorter. A black Republican can end up super wealthy if he chooses to. Why is that so? Because white people reach into their toolbox and pull out a Negro who will serve their needs, serve their means. And when they get tired of him, they put him back in the toolbox. So this whole thing about creativity, about progressiveness right now in this nation is indeed stifled. And in some people, it does not exist at all. Not that they were not created to be creative, but it doesn't exist because they don't believe it exists, and their focus is on materialism and not on progressive spiritualism. I hope I'm not rambling. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you. Miss, I'm sorry, I cut somebody off. Go ahead.
now I just wanted to ask, does that help them?
Yes, it does. And it also let me see that we have to stay the course. The world is already in chaos, but if we don't keep or maintain what we're doing now for mankind, there's no telling what can happen. But yes, I understand, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Anyone else? Questions or comments? I guess we've touched on the question I mentioned to you. I was going to ask Pastor. It's kind of a summation of what you said, what we've discussed already. All the things going on. You look at. I was looking at something the other day going on in India. How the prime minister has divided the country based on industry and education, and for whatever reason, he's decided to make the southern part of the nation more progressive than the northern part of the nation. And people, there's an outcry there. It's almost like one is just been demoted to be third world. They have no means of surviving or making a living for themselves. Or you have to have these vouchers to say that you have vouchers is my word. I forget what they call them. That you have such a level of education or training and it's, these things are not provided in the northern part of the country. So you look at that, and you look at some things going on in Africa, and so it's not just America. People are struggling. Chaos is strong, and the darkness is thick right now. So we have talked about that as far as we are concerned, and what we do 3 times a week on the lines, and that energy that is created and put out there. Where are we? Where are we in the midst of all this? Whether or not it be sickness or famines in Africa, or discriminations and racism and just hatred and bigotry. Where are we? Let's look at the good and the silver lining in this, as well as how to really observe the chaos and not be overwhelmed by it. So that was a question that I was going to ask Pastor, but anybody before he gets started care to speak to that?
Good morning, everyone. One of the things that I've drawn a conclusion with, as it relates to religion and education, both entities are heavily occupied with artificial intelligence. And what I mean by that is, for the longest, when people would ask who's the father of psychology, my answer would be Sigmund Freud. That would be my answer, because I was conditioned to think like that. However, Sigmund Freud also stated he got some of his learnings from J.F. Blumenbach, Arthur Schopenhauer, and even before them, there was Imhotep. So education itself has a lot of artificial intelligence in it. Christopher Columbus, he stated in his diary that his encounter with the Native Americans, and I may not say it like he said it, these Native Americans will be real easy to subdue and or capture. Now that part is not talked about in the history books, and it's the same thing with religion. Religion has a lot of artificial intelligence in it. I'm not saying that it doesn't have a meaning in it. Yet both entities, with me
George.
personally, yeah.
Can I ask a question just for my clarity? How are you defining artificial intelligence?
Just what it means. It's not really intelligence. It's less than a blowback of it. It's not intelligence just from the word artificial. It's something that appears to be intelligence, yet it's not. Just how we've been socially programmed to sit in a desk and do homework. We've been socially engineered to do that. However, studies have shown if you give a child a magic marker, the first place that they go to write is a wall. First place. So we've been socially engineered to to maneuver a certain way. So that's how I view artificial intelligence. I hope that helps you. And that's probably the best I can do. But I just look at religion and education is heavily occupied with artificial intelligence. That's it.
Can I reply to that?
Please.
I just want to say, if I get your meaning, George, I agree. Religion and education are mostly made up of things that are imposed onto what is natural for a human being, and it is, to some extent, the cultivation of our natural human instincts that is a more true form of education. And I don't just mean our sort of animalistic tendencies. I mean, when you're a kid, you're interested in certain things and not interested in other things. And ideally, you would proceed along the line of being educated in those things that you are interested in due to your personality, your instinct. And that is a more true form of education as opposed to, trying to cram a standardized amount of information into someone in the way that we do. Although there are certainly standards that need to be maintained, if you get what I'm saying. And that same thing happens in religion, because that is a imposition onto what is natural, which is spirituality, which at its essence is a desire to understand your own self. All of that suppresses the true intelligence that would emerge out of us if we were allowed to pursue those things we were instinctually and naturally interested in. If that was fostered and cultivated, we can become more intelligent. And the process of gaining intelligence is parallel to the process of essentially learning how to use your own mind and bringing it into alignment and pointing it in a certain direction. So all of these things are very much related to what is crumbling around us when we talk about the empire in decline, when we talk about the transition to a new nation. But the crumbling hasn't really, we're still in the beginning of this process, I believe. And for years, we've talked about the concept of standing in the gap, or being an anchor so that when that process is truly accelerates and is underway, there is a psychological and spiritual basis in the macro that people can use to form this new trajectory that we're on. That's what I hope will happen. That's what I believe will happen. But I do not think we're in the true, well, the decline, quote unquote, whatever its form, can happen quickly or slowly. And in both quickly and slowly, depending on the period of time. But I do think we're still sort of in the beginning of it. And it is the subtle thing that is dawning in the minds of, quote unquote, the regular people, that this structure that they're so familiar with is at its end. And the white supremacist component of that also recognizes it, which is why it does, the only thing that it even knows how to do, which is attempt to reestablish those hierarchies that made it feel comfortable. It will not be able to do that if on a purely mundane physical level, simply because too many of them are old and dying. And there are not enough of them who think in the same structural way. The generations that come after, essentially the baby boomer generation, they may be more radical in some cases, like actual Nazis, as opposed to just closeted white supremacists, that kind of thing. But the problem with that is it's self-defeating more quickly. They don't know how to create systems. They just know how to react. So it's a blessing in disguise, but one of those ones that is potentially destructive. Anyway, I hope that helps. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Ron, I have a comment. I'm sorry, I yield.
Oh, thank you, Miss Evelyn. Nick, thank you for cleaning that up for me, boss. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you.
We had the solar eclipse on Thursday, which was the 20th. And the last time we had one, we had the sandstorm that came over America. I don't know about the other countries. And then we had COVID. A lot of things that happened during that eclipse. So I just want to know, and I guess nobody really know what we have to look forward to as far as that coming. I know it's always something positive that will bring balance to mankind, but I do know that there are other things that will take place as well. That's my question / comment.
Anybody? Because the first you say that a lot of the things that have happened, whether or not we're talking about the lining of the planets or an eclipse or whatever, the comets, it was kind of something that kind of spoke to us, just it kind of reached out a little bit. It was more of a feeling. I didn't see or feel anything with this, but maybe someone else did. Anybody have any thoughts on Evelyn's question?
I do.
Yes, sir.
It's just like COVID was. No one saw it coming, but it came. So what am I saying? The eclipse, we don't know what it's going to look like, because even if we make those kinds of projections, we would be trying to shape it. So whatever it is to be, then it's in the hands of the universe to make that happen, and not in ours. The main thing that we have to do is make sure that whatever it is, that we respond to it and not react to it. And I believe that when we respond to it, excuse me, properly, then we begin to see the positivity of it, even though on the surface It may not look positive, just as COVID did to most of the people in the world. They saw it as being something negative as opposed to seeing the positivity in it. And I'll get you a question later on in a few minutes, Ron.
Yes, sir.
So, Evelyn, I hope that helps.
Yes, sir, it did. And you're right. We're learning not to shape anything. I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Good morning. This is Audrey. Pastor, when you say respond to it, you mean see it as a sign of the time and see it in spiritual terms rather than calling it whatever, and trying to shape it. That's what you mean, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's what I mean.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Pastor, if you will, can you elaborate a little bit more on that, please? What Audrey just said.
Okay, I'll do my best. I remember some years ago, Barbara taught a lesson, and it primarily looked at the difference between response and reaction. And what we saw more clearly is that most of the time we react to things. When we react to things, we don't give thought to it. And a reaction to something, whatever the stimuli is, that stimuli controls you because you are not thinking before you react. However, a response is thoughtful. A response is you quickly or taking the time to analyze or to make every effort to understand what is taking place, and therefore your response is more measured. Your response is more positive than it would be if you were to react to it. An example would be that you're in the office and someone walks up to you and or your supervisor says something to you that is outside of the boundaries of respect, and you quickly go off on them as opposed to responding to them. Why do you feel this way? What made you say that? That kind of thing. I remember last week that this person was telling me that one of the neighbors said something to their kid about a ball being too close to their flowers, and they were waiting for that adult, but the adult wouldn't come outside to speak to them about why did you say that to my child? But they were all up in arms about it, and they were angry about it. However, my words to them were, you can use the same words. However, your attitude must be different. You don't respond to them in the same way that they expect you to respond to them. Right now, you would not be responding, you would be reacting because you are angry. Why do you talk to my child like that? It can be said through reaction or through response. If you are saying, why did you speak that way to my child, and you're yelling and you're saying it in the angry tone, then that's reacting. But if you take a deep breath and ask in a mature manner, so why did you think it was okay for you to speak to my child the way you did? Too close to your flowers, what do you mean by that? That's a huge difference in being argumentative or being angry about it. And it usually diffuses the situation, and you come out in a better place than you would have if you had not responded to it the way that you did. Does that make sense? Somebody else can probably help me deal with this. I mean, explain that much better. Hopefully, anyway. Hello?
I can
So,
add.
Pastor, if I'm hearing you correctly, I'm sorry, excuse me.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if I'm hearing you correctly, then what you're saying is when you are responsive, you're reacting from a point of emotions. You're letting your emotions get the better of you, and you're reacting there. But when you take the time to just be more reflective and not just respond, you're at a place of being thoughtful and being more mindful about the decisions or what's going to come out of your mouth or what your actions will be next. If I'm hearing you correctly, is that what you're saying?
Yes, it's based on emotion versus being more reflective. Exactly. Thank you. I think Nick was going to add something to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that sort of phenomenon, I think, is partly the result of the way in which the sense of community is destroyed by basically capitalism and the way it structures society. And that's a bit more of the political, social side of it. But I believe that's one of the reasons that everyone feels like you can't trust teachers or you can't trust other people, adults around you, to participate in the raising of your own children. And maybe for good reasons, because one of the other things that is in parallel with that is that everyone is basically driven insane by the poverty and the pressure and the term is atomization of society and community that happens under the system. So all of those things are layered into the inability to respond and the tendency to react because everyone is on edge all the time or in some form of fight or flight, that kind of thing. Thank you.
I agree with that, and I think that's one of our biggest problems is we've lost our sense of community. We no longer have that. We no longer see. I just thinking about, especially the people on this phone that are my age, that can relate to how we grew up and the houses around us and the people in our neighborhoods and being able to walk home at night and knowing everybody sitting on the porch and people talking to you, what time it is, you need to hurry up and get home, that kind of thing. We've lost that. We don't care to that degree anymore. It's almost everybody doing their own thing, or we are not insensitive, but kind of so to what's going on around us and caring about other people. So I just agree with what you said, Nick. That's a good way of putting it. We've really lost that, and hopefully that's what things we are in the process of restoring.
Ron, I see that. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I see it a little different. I don't think we lost it at all. It was taken away from us on purpose. Think about it.
Okay.
We talk about the crime in the inner cities and neighborhoods, rural crime, etc. So where did it come from? Why is it that crime accelerated so quickly? It did because of two things. One, because of the CIA introducing crack into the neighborhoods in Los Angeles, spreading it around the world, across this country and around the world. Two, because of the efforts that were made to remove employment from the communities. When you take the jobs out of the communities and you flood the community with drugs, now you have created an industry of violence. And so it wasn't that we lost it as much as it was purposely taken away from us. And when you couple that with the church being the the nicest building in the middle of the community, but doing the least for the people in the community because they no longer live in that community. They commute to church because they live in other places. But those who are bound by those who are in that community with boundaries having been set around it, they not only do they not have the employment that they once had, they also don't have the proper food. Matter of fact, a food desert is nothing but a different way to commit genocide against a people. And when you see that you have corner stores and the only thing you have in it are canned goods and other foods laden with sugar and salt, that and preservative, that in itself is a type of delayed genocide that's taking place. So it is a combination of things that were introduced into the neighborhoods in order to take that away. And think about what's being said here. When we talk about the neighborhoods having changed, the only neighborhood that changed is the African neighborhood. White neighborhoods haven't changed. So why have they? What has made a difference in them? So when they took the jobs out, introduced the drugs, they increase the night riders. They increase the slave patrols, i.e., the police in the community, and the purpose is to harass. And no different than right after slavery, if you were caught with two or more on the corner, three or more on the corner, you were arrested for vagrants, which means that you were put in jail and you were rented out to white people to labor for them free, for nothing, enslaved all over again. That's the same thing that's happening in the African community. Take the job, put in the drugs, arrest them, put them in prison, destroy the family structure, take the grocery stores out, put the corner stores in, remove health care or any hopes of having health care that's worth anything. And now what happens? You have put people in a position where there is a dog-eat-dog community. And that is the reason that the care that you were talking about, Ron, I do believe has evaporated in the communities. Not so much we gave it up as it was taken away from us. And that is what that is one of the things that assimilation brought. What integration? But that's one of the things that it brought. And no wonder that Dr. King said one of the worst things he done to his people was to fight for integration. I hope that you can see that what I'm trying to say here.
Indeed, I do. Yeah, I agree with you. Indeed. And I lived through all that, all those and not so subtle changes took place.
And guess what? We blame ourselves. We say we lost that. No, you see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So that has been fostered in our communities. The news media is really good at that, making us feel like we are to blame for all of the destruction that has taken place within the boundaries of our family structures. We have been the blame has been laid on us. For example, when Trayvon Martin was killed, they started looking into his family's life history. They couldn't find any police records on him, so now they started looking at the people in his orbit and his parents, his uncles, to see what kind of jail record they have. Instead of looking at him for who he is, they look for a criminal record. When a white person is is killed or or accused of killing someone, they don't look into the history, the criminal history. The people who walk into schools and shoot people, they don't look into the family history to see who committed a crime. But every time there is an African who is accused or arrested, something like that, the first thing that they do is look into the history. They make the victim of, they make them the one who was murdered. They make that one the criminal. Tamir Rice, 11, 12 years old, the kid that was killed in Cleveland. Police, in less than 4 seconds, they killed him because he had a toy gun. Now he becomes the culprit, and the policeman become the victim. Those kinds of things that the news media perpetrate against us, those kinds of things why do the news media do that? Is not because we have a free press. The news media does that because it is a state operated news media. The government has pushes those things into the news outlets, and that's the reason that they come out the way they do. I know what you're thinking. Well, Russia has a government controlled media, so does America. The only difference between the two is that America tells you that Russia is government ran and owned, which it is, but they don't. But the one in America is owned by individuals. Yet those same individuals are in bed with the government, and that is the reason you can have an event take place where you go into a mosque and beat people half to death. And then when they respond to you, they become the terrorists and not you. That's because of the state-ran media. Does that make sense, Ron? Or to the rest of you as well?
Yes, it does to me.
Yes.
Yep. And just to give, has anyone heard of that? So Fox News was not too long ago sued by Dominion, which is the company that I think runs the voting machines or whatever. And Fox News recently settled out of court with Dominion. And as soon as that happened, I was like, oh, Fox News won. But in this case, Fox News actually had to pay a bunch of money to Dominion for basically lying constantly about the voter fraud, et cetera, they've been talking about. But I said Fox News won because they do not have to go on TV and say that they lied. They settled out of court for a very large sum of money, and Dominion accepted it, which basically means that nothing is going to happen. So I bring that up as an example of that is the fusion of sort of capitalism and well, deeper than capitalism probably. It's just the greed and white supremacy going hand in hand to work together. What should have happened if it were a sort of just event, it would be Tucker Carlson, as unlikely as this probably was, Tucker Carlson on TV being forced to read a legal statement saying we lied. That is not going to happen because greed essentially won in this case. And that is exactly how these two things work hand in hand. That is exactly what has to be destroyed if I can hear mute your phone if it's not muted. That is exactly what has to be destroyed if the nation that we hope to build is to be founded. Currently, it is based on whatever structure this is, it is based on greed, as we all know. And that, I think, fundamentally is one of the, fundamental things that has to stop. And it is the religion of materialism at its core. Thank you.
Thank you. Good discussion, y'all.
Ron, I have another question.
Okay.
Is the whole world reacting? We just talked about reacting and responding. Is the whole earth not reacting? Because I'm seeing a lot of youth being killed more than ever. I'm talking about me now. I don't know about anybody else. But a lot of youth are being killed, a lot of kids. And I don't want to grow numb to what I'm seeing in the earth. That's my question.
Well, Evelyn, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Pastor. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
You won't grow numb to it. As cold and cruel as it may sound, without the events that you are describing, whether it be school, workplace, or whatever, the leading cause of death among young people, children and teenagers, is gun violence. If this were not happening in our faces, no one would be talking about gun violence or the proliferation of guns in this nation. The things that happen and they are put in your face are the things that forces people to deal with them. What I'm saying is this: if America is not forced to deal with its issue of the proliferation of guns, then quietly there would be a accumulation of guns, and all of a sudden an outbreak of white supremacists are doing what they want to do in terms of lynching people of color, and nothing would be done about it. However, when you make it centerpiece, and then when you see the kids who are dying from it, white kids are dying from it, then it becomes an issue. Think about it. As many as the Black folk who died in Black communities from gun violence, no one cared until gun violence spilled into the schools and white kids were being killed. All of a sudden, there's a problem with the proliferation of guns. Then every white person who kills multiple people is mentally ill. Every Black person who kills one person is a barbarian or an animal. When you look at what happened in Uvalde, Texas, those were brown people, predominantly brown people in that school. And look what happened. They stood on the outside and really without the pressure from the internal and external communities, nothing would have been done to those policemen who were supposed to go into that school and save those kids' lives. Do I think that many policemen would have stood around in a school that was predominantly white? No, I don't. I do not think that would have happened. We are living in an internal colonial society. And right now, that living in this internal colonial society, the foundational structure of it is being destroyed. And what we are seeing, part of the destruction is what we are seeing with gun violence, because the extension of the power of white people is their gun. And when that violence began to have an adverse effect on them, it is only then that they began to deal with it, or began to look like they want to deal with it anyway. Well, I'm done. Thank you. I hope that helps.
It did.
Ron, you asked a question about India and what was happening in India. What's happening there is no different than what's happening here. The whole thing about vouchers in this country is to keep Black and brown people from being educated. The voucher system is being introduced because the end game is to have private education in this country, as it did prior to the introduction of public education through those who were the people who were freed from slavery, introducing a bill for public education, especially in the State House in South Carolina. for public education, and that's being, excuse me, and that's gradually being taken away. And the greatest supporters in the streets for that are the people who are going to suffer the most, and that is quote unquote middle class and poor white people are going to suffer the most because they're not going to be able to afford it. Now, when we talk about internal colonialism, it's no different than what's happening in India. India is beginning to reinstitute or establish the power of a system that was put in place by the British. When the British went into India, the people, the darker skinned people, were separated from the lighter skinned people, and the lighter skinned people were the maids, and some of them were educated, and the darker skinned people were the servants. They were the street sweepers. They were the garbage men. They did all of the work that white people were not going to do, and that process of colonialism continued until the early parts of the 1900s. Now, colonialism did not end, it went beneath the surface. And to keep it intact, the British as well as Western Europeans made sure that the only people who were in governmental control in India and other places like India were the people who had been chosen by them. And right now, what we are seeing there is self-hatred with a people who think simply because they're light and bright and damn near white, they can do anything they want to do to the people who are darker in complexion. This is no different also than what's happening in Africa as well, because if you read the history of how India developed and how India embraced its beliefs in spirituality or in religion, what you will see is that it came out of the Kushite kingdom. It was Africans who went into India and taught. Not only did they teach spirituality, but they also taught architecture and other forms of what we call education now. And when the British came in, that's who they encountered. They encountered the darker people who were the offsprings of the Kushites. And they did the same thing to them that they did in Africa. And they're doing the same thing in America. They're doing the same thing in the Congo. They're doing the same thing everywhere on the face of this earth. And then when you catch them and they get caught up in doing it, what do they tell you? We need to go to diversity training. Diversity training is nothing but rehab for racists. That's what diversity training is rehab for racists. And rehab for racists does not work. The only thing that removes someone from being a racist is when they make a decision to embrace humanity for being who they are, humans, as opposed to judging people whether or not they're human or an animal based upon the color of their skin. I hope that helped your question, the response to your question, Ron. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And as you mentioned, that systematic approach of controlling things, it's a recipe that has worked all over the world. And I think what I wanted you to also, look at it and tie in. That's part of what we're doing, is bringing a lot of this to the surface, and everything that comes from this, how ugly it looked, whether it be the storms or the chaotic weather, from sicknesses and diseases, from the spikes in crime in certain areas, and earthquakes, and I think all of this is tied together. So that's why I brought it up. I think it is all on the surface to be dealt with, and here we are. So yeah. But I just think it's important that we bring that up and talk about it from time to time.
When we look at that, let's look at Jesus. If Jesus were walking the earth right now, and Jesus walked into an evangelical church, and sat on the front row and told them he had a message, they would drag him out. There is no way that Jesus could go to the evangelical church and do what he did according to the scriptures, because he's too dark. He's an African. And if Jesus were to go to the African church and say the same things and make the same attempts to speak, they would put him out, because he has not been authenticated by white people. The white church has not told the black church that it's okay to let him speak and say the things that he has already said in the scriptures. What does that say to you? What do you gather from that? You don't have to have slave patrols in the places where you have slaves in control of the people. You don't have to concern yourself with keeping people under control and acquiescing to whatever you want them to acquiesce to, as long as you have someone in that African pulpit doing it for you. Because that African in that pulpit is not going to do or say anything that has not already been approved by the white evangelicals. I hope that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments, anyone?
This is
Sister
Audrey.
Scott? Hey, Audrey.
This is just all making me think that the whole thing is designed to help to make us look away from inside ourselves, which is basically what Jesus taught, is that you have internal look inside yourself to find yourself. But all of religion makes it into an external thing. You know, you have to behave this way, you have to do this, you have to tithe, you have to do blah, blah. You have to say these kinds of things. You have to go out and proselytize. You have to, religion makes it all an external thing. And if you don't look, if that external part of you is not appealing to religion, then you're not a Christian or whatever. But it's robbed us basically of that internal reflection that we need. That's that meditation and reflection and quiet time. I mean, quiet reflection helps us do. Religion has taken all of that away. I don't even know what I'm trying to say, but I just feel like hearing all of this discussion, it just makes me feel like we've all been scapegoated and gaslighted and whatever to make us feel like we are not worthy, and that if we're not under the control of a certain kind of thing, then we're just not it. We don't matter. But we have to know that that is a false god. We have to know that it takes going inside of ourselves and reflecting and meditating, and that is how we come to know the Creator. And it has nothing to do with any kind of external anything, because any kind of external anything is idolatry. I don't know, I think I'm rambling, but those are just my thoughts. If anybody wants to add to it or clarify it or whatever. Anyway, thanks.
You're not rambling, Audrey. And it's,
Not
and
at
it's
all.
to me, it's crystal clear. That's just exactly what I mean. We were told, Lord, you know I'm not worthy, but yet you call me. We tell ourselves that. We've been taught to say that. When Jesus clearly says that they that submit, they that worship, God must worship in spiritual truth. They that submit to Elohim must submit based on spiritual truth. That submission to Elohim is being submissive to who you were created to be. When you look at it internally, what Jesus is saying, be submissive to who you are, Elohim. The only way you can submit, the only way you can understand what I'm saying, the only way you can be who you are supposed to be is based on you understanding what spiritual truth is. That's what that verse is talking about. So Audrey, you are right on target. That's exactly what we are dealing with. And thank you.
I love that you said we are to submit to Elohim, which is that internal reflection and that meditation and all of that. Because sometimes even I forget that I am that. And it's kind of a struggle sometimes, but yeah, thank you for that reminder.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was beautifully said, and I think it was puts a beautiful cap on the day's lesson. What we've discussed so far kind of sums it up beautifully. And that's a good place to take a pause if that's okay with everyone. Is there anything else, questions or comments that come to your attention you'd like to discuss now? Okay. Well then, we're at a good place to reflect, and we will resume tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Thank you, everyone. Questions, your comments, your energy, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a great day.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye, everybody.